This is Marlo Bloom Report and Interview, and I'm here with Marcia Ball, fabulous, amazing musician, songwriter, and now activist.
Always activist.
Yeah.
A rebel in my spare time.
Well, tell us about your being a rebel, because that's the important thing right now.
Well, I've always tended to open my mouth when I just would get fed up, would have had enough, and this was a recent event, particularly. I've always been in environmental and social situations, and of course things that are positive like Health Alliance for Austin Music. But recently I became aware of the Texas legislature's defunding of women's health programs. And there was just last week an order signed at the bequest of Governor Rick Perry to the Commissioner of Health and Human Services, Tom Hughes, who signed this order saying that we would not give 130,000 women their basic health care needs because we're not going to accept a 9-to-1 match of federal funds to state funds, which will amount to $30-some-odd million, because these providers who give these women their pap smears and their cancer screenings and everything, some of them are Planned Parenthood clinics. Now, by federal law, Planned Parenthood doesn't use any federal money for abortion providing. By all statistics, 3% of what Planned Parenthood does at all is provide abortions for people. And contrary to what I have read, other opponents of Planned Parenthood say they do not promote or profit from abortions anyway. That is all privately funded. Planned Parenthood is the provider of basic women's health services for 40% of Texas women. And Rick Perry and the Republicans in the state house want to stop giving them any money. This came on the heels of the budget which was passed in June, which took a $100 million budget for women's health services, low-income health services, and cut it to $35 to $38 million. Took 2/3 of the funding already has been taken away from women's health care. It was just shocking to me. And my friend Sharon Mays from Fort Worth and I were sitting here at my house at the table and just thinking, what can we do? What can anybody do? And I've always believed that you just have to raise your voice. Someone somewhere has to raise their voice. It has to start. And she said, well, maybe we should dress up in 20s clothes and take a train to Washington, because that's where we are these days with the situation. They're rolling us back into the 19th century, women and everything they're doing, and they're just digging their hole deeper and deeper. The Republicans and the Christian, the religious right. And I don't believe that most people, and I don't believe that many legislators who are pushing this thing really want women hurt as badly as we're being hurt by this. But we sat down and started talking about what we could do, and she said we need to demonstrate. And I said, well, the problem is closer to home. In fact, the problem is right over there on Congress Avenue and 11th Street, and that's where we need to go stand. So we decided if we wore red, we'd be easier to see. And because we're so mad we're seeing red, that's what we called it. And I put out one Facebook post, not on my band page, not on my fan page, but on my personal Facebook page where I have under 400 friends. And it was amazing what happened. It turns out I have 400 really important, very active friends who each have, in some cases, 4,000 friends. And I started getting back letters from Mark Strama, our state rep here. Of course, Elliot Neistat, who's our most wonderful state rep from this district, whose office I called immediately to find out what we could do and what was legal and where we could stand,
Right.
not get in trouble. And they immediately started giving me all the information. And I contacted Planned Parenthood people because I found out later they were doing their own bus tour of Texas. But we're separate from that, although I went to their rally. And Carolyn Wonderland sang at their rally, and Jimmy Dale Gilmore and his son Colin Gilmore sang at their rally, and I had the pleasure of introducing both of them. But what we're doing is for all women of Texas, and you don't have to, it's not about religion, it's not about your political party. It's the fact that we need the services that they're taking away from us in their very misguided attack on Planned Parenthood, which is the tiniest little bullseye on that great big target that they're just completely riddling with their ideological darts.
You know, you had that point, you made that realization. Are you surprised, especially by using social media, that you got the response that you did?
Well, I've always known that it was a force to be reckoned with, and more you hear about that and you read about that, the way things move along with social media. I am pretty surprised that that one post generated so much immediate interest, which then led to incoming inquiries, and then I sent out emails after that. Once again, not to my fan base, but to my more or less local base of friends here. But you know, if you have friends that are in the legislature, and if you have friends who you know are involved with all the liberal causes in town, the environmentalists and everything, we all run in the same circles. And they have prodigious mailing lists. And it was great. The mayor came to our first one. Several, Donna Howard and Mark Strama and Elliot were all there. Valinda Bolton, who was a former state rep here. We had important lawyers. And this is not by any means all women. We've had a lot of men supporting us. Dave Richards was at our first one. Jerry Jeff Walker's wife Susan was at the first one and came back to the second one and brought their granddaughter. Delbert McClinton was at our first one with his family. We had twice as many people the second time. I had terrible, terrible flop sweat. I really, really was afraid. I dropped off Sharon, my co-conspirator, and my neighbor behind me, the guy's mother-in-law is here in town visiting, and she came across the yard when we pulled up to gather up. She came across the yard in her red shirt and said, "Can I get a ride?"
Yeah.
So I dropped them off at 10 minutes to 12, and I'm just worrying the whole time, oh God, I hope people come. There were already 50 people there.
Oh.
So I think we probably realistically had 200 at the first one. Not all at the same time maybe, but 200 at one point, yes. And over 300 this time, maybe 4. And we had 12-year-olds making our signs and 3 generations of some families there. We had a woman and her daughter and 2 nieces who drove up from Del Rio. I mean, the state is suffering. Clinics have closed all over the state, and not just Planned Parenthood. In Austin, the 42-year-old People's Community Clinic was receiving $500,000 a year, approximately, almost $500,000. And a clinic out in East Austin called El Buen Samaritano was receiving over $500,000 a year, 2010, 2011, 2012, nothing. We got nothing. So there's a sign on the door of the People's Community that says we can no longer provide these services for free.
Do you think this is really a war on women or on Planned Parenthood specifically?
It's strange because In the immediate case of, well, it's both. It's both, because in the immediate case of what we've been dealing with, their attack is on Planned Parenthood, to end Planned Parenthood, and it's a lightning rod. And it's easy for them to say, and they can say abortion and everybody freaks out. So they say Planned Parenthood and they tie it all together, and they ignore the other 97% of services that Planned Parenthood provides. It's an attack on that. But then it has rolled out into something truly bizarre, because you've opened the door to every extremist, every kook, every form of cleric. I mean, I coined the phrase Texas Taliban in my first email, and it's not far from the truth. If they let the clerics run the country, we're going to be blasted back into the Stone Age. Why would anybody, and if they say, this is what kills me, if they say they're against birth control, then they're being hypocrites. And I would like to stand up in the State House of Texas and say, who has used birth control? Who of your wives have used birth control? If you have not used birth control, raise your hand. It's ridiculous. I mean, it could get even more personal than that if people would tell the truth about what they're doing and what they have done. They're doing it for political gain. They're doing it because they perceive their base as a 55-year-old religious, a churchgoer who believes that, no, who says that, because I don't think they believe it. This is my other question. How many of you had premarital sex? Don't lie to me. How many people in this country, in this world, didn't have premarital sex? And they're pandering to this tiny little hypocritical base of people who want to control other people's lives, even down to their most private, most personal acts.
Absolutely, yeah. Well, Marcia, what do you want people to do?
I want, first of all, people to vote. I want people to read and to think. I want women to just stand up and say, we're not going to take this. You can't take these things away from us. You can't control us. I'd love for women to run for office. I'm talking to girls. We've been doing this for years. We were laughing about all us gray-haired women out there waving signs about birth control. Somebody asked, a friend of mine said today, somebody said, what do you use for birth control? She said, my age. It's not really our problem, except that we're compassionate about the people who are the residual victims of this action. We're compassionate because we think that families need to be cared for. And these people who are making this happen, and dare I say, it's the Republicans in the State House and in National Congress who are apparently being the most extreme practitioners of this body control and mind control. So I'd like people to vote better people in, first of all. I'd like people to not be hypocritical and to stand up and say, hey, wait a minute, this is not right. I'd like 1,000 people to show up next Tuesday in front of the Capitol wearing red. I'd like people to wear red all over town, all over Houston and all over Dallas. And we do have sympathetic movements. We have had people in other states. I've got a friend in Milwaukee who's spreading the word up there. I don't know. We're actually, there's talk because in the wake of the uproar about what's going on, this recent defunding of the women's health program. Rick Perry has been forced into a corner and has said that he will find the funding to make up for the loss of federal money. And by the way, it's a federal law. Obama didn't make the law. He can't pull the plug. He can't just say send the money. It's a federal law that Texas is circumventing. So you can't blame him. It's us trying to get around a federal law with a ruling from the state. So Rick Perry said he was going to find the money to keep these clinics open, to fund this $30 million that we're losing. I just don't think he can. If we have $30 million laying around, then maybe he should put that back in the budget to replace some of the $70 million that they took out in June when they did their first really, really deep cut in women's health services. Let's use it there and take the federal money. But he says he's going to do it. So instead of that ruling taking effect yesterday on March 14th, we're actually, I think, going to not have it take effect until the end of this month, and perhaps if they ask for another little bit of time to find the money, maybe a little longer. I don't know what they think is going to happen, because I don't think he can find the money. Maybe he thinks we'll forget. I don't think we're going to forget. And I'll tell you personally, as I said at the beginning of this, I'm a rebel in my spare time. Like everybody else in this world, I am really busy. And it's hard to choose your one event or your one cause, because there's so much. And as I said earlier today, I'm walking this fine line, and this is, somebody else said it, I'm copying it. I'm walking a fine line between being well-informed and going out of my mind. Because the more you think, and the more you know, the madder you get about what's going on, and you want to affect all these things. So what I figured was 2 hours a week. You can do 2 hours a week. It doesn't have to be the same people every week, and then I thought, like I said, I'm in my spare time. I had last week, the week before, and this next week, and then I've got to go on tour for 2 weeks. I'm going to be gone. So I couldn't. So I thought, well, if I set this reachable goal, if it's a vigil, and by the way, in the original letter that I sent out, something else had happened that week. There's a foreign correspondent named Marie Colvin, and she was in Syria, and she was killed the week that we brainstormed this. She was 56 years old. She spent her entire life reporting from the most dangerous war zones in the world, bringing truth to people, reporting on injustice and inhumanity, while we could sit and glance at the headlines and walk away. And in honor of Marie Colvin, and in honor of Molly Ivins, who said, we'll never get anywhere until we get out in the streets and bang on pots and pans. And we have plenty of pots and pans at our rally. People bring their own pots and pans and their own signs, which are sometimes hilarious. We set in motion this very reachable goal. 3 weeks, 2 hours a week, noon to 2. And we'll go on. We'll keep our Facebook going. We may go back in April and start 3 more weeks. We're not going away. And I feel like we've made some progress. And it's just a manageable goal. And we're going to continue to talk to people. We'll propagandize now. We're in motion.
So the next event will be this coming Tuesday.
This coming Tuesday,
March 20th.
March 20th.
Noon to 2.
Noon to 2.
Where did people meet?
In front of the Capitol at the corner of Congress Avenue and 11th Street. Down by the street. We don't gather on the steps. You have to have a permit. But you can stand on the sidewalk. You can stand on the grounds. And we're a kind of a loud vigil or louder than your average vigil.
What do people need to bring?
Their entire families and 10 or 15 of their closest friends. And you can bring your own sign, or we've got cardboard and poster paint and a few signs. You know, at this point, I reckon that we have spent something around $95 on this project.
Compared to the lobbyists which are passing this, which have spent hundreds and thousands of dollars.
Oh, yeah.
And wearing red, is it optional or requested?
It's optional,
or...
but, you know, of course, I've met several now who said they didn't have a red shirt. I'm thinking, really?
Nothing in red?
You don't have red? No, we won't throw you out if you're not wearing red.
All right.
If you have a red burqa, that would be, I think, probably pretty effective.
It would be effective, but very
But hot. Carry a red umbrella.
There you go. Marcia, thank you so much for doing this. We appreciate it. Any place that people can find more information on the web that you can turn them on?
We have a Facebook page called Seeing Red, which is the name of our movement. Seeing Red, Save Women's Health Program in Texas. But usually lately, if you just hit Seeing Red, you'll see our Seeing Red logo. You can, I think, pull the logo off and print it out. There's lots of pictures of our various, our 2 events. We're rabble-rousing regularly.
Well, you're doing it for people like me, and I appreciate it.
Well, that's the thing. Story after story from people who have used, do use the Planned Parenthood clinics and all the other clinics that make care available to women in our state and in our country. They're just mean.
Yeah.
It doesn't make any sense. It doesn't make economic sense. For the amount of money that they're not spending on birth control, abortions are going to go up. You know, this is all the same flip side of the coin of the people who want to only teach abstinence in the schools and not any meaningful safety or sex education for our children. So it's unjust, it's inhumane, it's not economically feasible or viable, and it's just plain mean.
Marcia Ball, thank you so much.
You're so welcome for doing this. Yakety yak. And talk back. Who signed this order saying that we would not give 130,000 women their basic health care needs because we're not going to accept a 9-to-1 match of federal funds to state funds, which will amount to $30-some-odd million, because these providers who give these women their pap smears and their cancer screenings and everything, some of them are Planned Parenthood clinics. Now, by federal law, Planned Parenthood doesn't use any federal money for abortion providing. By
This is Marlo Bloom Report and Interview, and I'm here with Marcia Ball, fabulous, amazing musician, songwriter, and now activist.
always activist,
Yeah.
a rebel in my spare time.
Well, tell us about your being a rebel, because that's the important thing right now.
Well, I've always tended to open my mouth with all statistics. 3% of what Planned Parenthood does at all is provide abortions for people. And contrary to what I have read, other opponents of Planned Parenthood say they do not promote or profit from abortions anyway. That is all privately funded. Planned Parenthood is the provider of basic women's health services for 40% of Texas women. And Rick Perry and the Republicans in the state house want to stop giving them any money. This came on the heels of the budget which was passed in June, which took a $100 million budget for women's health services, low-income health services, and cut it to $35 to $38 million. Took 2/3 of the funding already has been taken away from women's health care. It was just shocking to me. And my friend Sharon Mays from Fort Worth and I were sitting here at my house at the table and just thinking, what can we do? What can anybody do? And I've always believed that you just have to raise your voice. Someone somewhere has to raise their voice. It has to start. And she said, well, maybe we should dress up in 20. And I just would get fed up, would have had enough. And this was a recent event, particularly. I've always been in environmental and social situations, and of course things that are positive like Health Alliance for Austin Music. But recently I became aware of the Texas legislature's defunding of women's health programs. And there was just last week an order signed at the bequest of Governor Rick Perry to the Commissioner of Health and Human Services, Tom